Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Konoha Shinden, Steam Ninja Scrolls. Chapter 2. Strange Festival. I like maps. Especially, I love when the topography depicted in the maps and the actual scenery match precisely. Because I think that even the person who made that map once had seen the same scenery, just like me now, and I get excited. Also that day, I unfolded the map and checked the situation around me. I tried to compare the map with the place of many mountains in the distance and the position of a streaming brook. The whole scenery that was spreading in front of my eyes and the map I was holding in my hands matched exactly to the inch. The map was extremely accurate. Surely, a skillful person had drawn it. It seemed to me that the person who had drawn this map, someone whose face and name I didn't know, as opposed to a map like this, was guiding me through time, and I was deeply moved. This single sheet of map that I was holding in my hands was the footprints of a person who had walked through unmapped roads, and the crystallization of their hardships left behind for the people who had come after them. Even I would add new writings in a map like this. The places of sources that don't appear in a map, and information on roads that are closed for landslides or something like that. I'd improve maps for those who come after me. The new information I note down would be probably updated again by someone else's hand and would keep being revived. Even if just a little, I felt like I could leave behind me a proof that I existed. Someday, the things I noted down may be useful to someone. It was nothing but a single sheet of a map, I thought, but for some reason it made me happy. The detailed map of the environs of the country border was a precious thing. No matter how peaceful these times were, shinobi couldn't wander about the country borders as they liked, and also a lot of information on the maps had become inevitably obsolete. This mission was an inspection of the undeveloped areas near the country border. Of course, we needed to bring the maps of the outskirts up to date. We had to report the results of our research in both the countries, the land of fire and the land of hot water, and share our maps. Naturally, from the point of view of a person who was scheming evil plans, something like detailed geographic information of the areas near the country borders was a thing that they wanted desperately. My improved information might be used to hurt somebody. This couldn't absolutely happen. I don't want them to be useful for evil people. However, the previous Hokage was traveling together with me in this mission so that it wouldn't happen. Probably, they'd never have imagined that the previous Hokage in person would have come even near the land of hot water, not even in their dreams. Because even I wouldn't even have imagined in my dreams, just a few days ago, that the previous Hokage would have considered a thing like this and done an inspection mission. This wasn't a mere pleasure trip. No way. Is everything alright? The previous Hokage, the sixth, asked me. Everything seems okay along the road. I answered, the map still unfolded. Right now, we were walking down an old highway that was in the area near the border of the land of fire and the land of hot water. Since its width was narrow and unhandy, another highway, which had been built anew, was used nowadays. For this reason, of course there was no one in the old highway except for us. However, for the sake of our duty of improving the map, we ventured to walk even in this sort of place. Good. The map is old, so I was a little worried, the sixth said without looking like he was worried at all, on the contrary, still with his rather calm expression. Then, he proceeded while pushing Gai-san's wheelchair. The old highway continued as if it was weaving its way through the bare surface of the mountain. If you looked at it from above, a river was streaming at the bottom of E Valley. The scenery was extraordinarily nice, but there were no fences or anything. If you missed your footing once, you'd end up head over heels. The highway was narrow, and you simply couldn't proceed at night or in a bad weather. The fact that this road wasn't used nowadays was probably because of this. However, luckily it was sunny now, and also the unobstructed view was favorable. Since there weren't travelers, surely there weren't even bandits aiming at them. On the contrary, it was a safe road for us. Moreover, as one could expect from the fact that it was used as a highway in the past, the soil under our feet had been neatly maintained. The stone paving, which was probably neatly spread all over in the past, here and there had cracked, come unstuck, and even if the grass had grown wildly from the gaps, it was more comfortable than cutting recklessly through the mountains by far. "Can we rest a little?" the sixth began, after we had proceeded for a while. "The weather is good, and it's not a hasty journey." To be honest, I was grateful for this proposal. Even now, in this inspection mission, my role was the sixth and Gai-san's attendant, but even if I was guarding them, the thing I could do besides it was adapting myself to the situation of the moment, taking the initiative. Anyhow, I was the only shinobi in active duty. In short, also exploring my surroundings to bring up to date the information of the maps was my duty, and of course, just like some time ago, before the research I also had to be vigilant as a guard, and while I was checking the road and the topography I also had to ensure ourselves water and food supplies, just in case. And even if said I was guarding the sixth and Gai-san, it didn't mean that I was always at their side. I had to move skipping about. Here and there, surprisingly busy. And even this was natural, but in order to down the position of the sources that didn't appear in the maps yet, I had to walk on the actual places, which looked like routes that normally people didn't use. Probably I was the first human being to have walked on them, and it was extremely hard to do. I, who had been walking continuously since morning, stopped my feet, folding the map. "Sure, I'm a little bit tired," I said, and stretched. It was a good moment for a break. "Mirai, you mustn't be exhausted this much. You should have much more physical strength," Gai-san told me as I was stretching my arms. Gai-san was always positive. Even those words, they weren't a criticism, but a strong cheering exhortation. It wouldn't be an exaggeration saying that physical strength is the most important thing for a shinobi. Gai-san continued, staring at the green in the distance. "Maybe because of age, I'm losing physical strength year by year." Suddenly it had turned into a painful conversation. Without stopping, Gai-san started clutching his fists. Day after day, I thought that if I kept training much more when I was young. Gai-san groaned, and the sixth muttered, with a weary expression, "No, if you had trained more than that, you'd have died." What kind of training on earth did he do? I wondered, but I didn't want to guess too much. Well, at any rate, having physical strength is better than not having it. "Mirai, you're still young. From now on, you'll improve much, much more. Improve especially your physical strength." It was exactly like that. Physical strength is necessary. I nodded, and the sixth whispered into my ear, "Guy is partly a monster of physical strength, so it's okay if you listen only to half of the things he says." "Kakashi." I heard Yu. There was an awkward atmosphere at first, maybe because of the age difference between us, but now I thought that I was getting a lot used to this. Well, physical strength is important, but as I thought, spiritual strength is the thing that counts most in the end. "Ha ha ha," the sixth laughed. "There's no point in having spiritual strength without having physical strength, in the end." Gai-san replied, and laughed heartily. "We all train, so it's pretty natural that we have physical strength, right? Physical strength is a standard among others for a shinobi." "That's why I think it's spiritual strength for sure," the sixth said, smiling. "Having spiritual strength is a shinobi's feature. That's why it's physical strength for sure. If you neglect the basis, then to hell with spiritual strength, too. I think that you have to be aware of and forge your physical strength," Gai-san said, smiling as well. Both the sixth and Gai-san were talking in a calm tone, but I couldn't help but feel that there was something somehow different from the usual atmosphere of some time ago. "Right, Mirai. What do you think?" Gai-san asked me with a smiling face. "What, you ask?" "Well, of course, we were talking about which one is more important, physical strength or spiritual strength." "Right, Kakashi?" "Right. Assume that you have to choose one of the two," the sixth nodded with a smiling face. I didn't know why, but I broke out in a cold sweat as those two were staring at me with a smiling face. For some reason, I felt the air of the place strangely heavy. It had become suffocating. Why this? I couldn't stand it. I had no time to hesitate any longer. I swallowed with a gulp, and I gave them the answer that seemed boldly the best. Here, they're both important, you can't say that. That moment, I was interrupted by the sixth. Yeah. One of the two. Gai-san smiled gently. There was no way out of it. Physical strength? Or spiritual strength? Which on earth should I choose? However, in this situation, even if I chose one of the two, certainly it would turn into a 2 versus 1 relationship. It was the negative effect of a group of 3 people. In a group of 3, things like these happen sometimes. The position of third wheel is the most extreme example. When I was troubled about what was the best thing to choose between the two, the sixth spoke. Oh, if we don't leave soon, it'll get dark. That's right. We have to leave this mountain quickly. Well then, this ends our break. As the two began to prepare their baggage cheerfully, I instinctively let out a long sigh of relief. If we arrived to a post town, first of all a hot spring. Yeah, that's right. I'm pretty sweaty. Before I became aware of it, we had came back to the usual loose atmosphere. I was saved. Finally I had been set free from this irrational double choice. Even if I say so myself, I think I endured it well. As expected from me. Even if I had been pushed into an absurd choice, I showed that I could endure. A shinobi is a person who endures, right? Then, even if I had averted this discussion like this, and even if the situation had settled down, if only we managed to reach quietly the post town, well then, the answer of some time ago after we arrived to an inn. The two grinned. Did it mean that I still had to endure? We left the mountain, and many tourists appeared in front of us, who had finally arrived to a post town. In terms of structure, it wasn't a big town at all, but it was full of people. Strange. I'd heard that it was a much quieter town, but... The sixth said with a doubtful voice. Hey, there won't be any rooms, right? Judging from the looks of the town, which was jammed with a lot of people, the reservation of a bed today would probably be hopeless, without even asking. Perhaps, all the inns had no vacancy. Looks like there's a festival. Gai-san pointed to a poster affixed on the front of a shop. In it, together with the character festival written in big letters, there were drawn, one next to the other, a mask with a motif of dogs, and a mask with a motif of cats. It seemed that lots of people were all indifferently looking forward to this festival. A festival, indeed. The sixth muttered, looking around him. I kept a watchful eye on my surroundings, too. Of course, to keep guard. I sharply observed the gazes, the expressions, the movements of the people walking down the road. Without being noticed, thoroughly smoothly. At any rate, those masks are unusual, the sixth said carelessly. Surely, among the people that passed by, there were a lot of people who wore the mask drawn on the poster. Probably they were participants of the festival. The children that were running around and playing were wearing it on their faces, but also the adults were walking wearing it on their brows or the back of their heads, or on their arms or waists. Even though the way of wearing it changed according to each one's liking, somehow they gave the impression of ninja forehead protectors. Then, people who were wearing dog masks were having friendly conversations with those who wore the same dog mask, and of course people who were wearing cat masks were happily walking together with fellows with the same cat mask. I had the feeling that those who wore the same mask were friends. What kind of festival is this? When I looked closely, even the employees of the shops around us were wearing one of the two masks, dog or cat depending on the shop. It was natural, because it was a festival of the whole town, but the strange thing was that the name of this festival, which was supposed to be the main point, wasn't written anywhere in the posters. Thereupon, the sixth lowered the volume of his voice while he was examining his surroundings for some reason. This is the so-called Dog-Cat Festival. No, it's also called Cat-Dog Festival. Which one? The way of calling it changes depending on people. At the sixth's extremely vague reply, Gai-san tilted his head and began to talk. This town is a little special. Mirai, pay attention to the line under your feet. The line under my feet, in the main street where I was standing, a straight line that divided the street exactly into two had been drawn. At first, I wondered if it was the right side of the passage or the left side of the passage or a rule like that, but when I looked at the passers-by that were walking as they pleased, it didn't really seem like that. Since it wasn't clear, I hadn't paid particular attention, but, right. Maybe it's for this festival? No. That's the country border. The country border. I'd never have thought that in the main street, crowded with people, there was the border of the land of fire and the land of hot water. Or rather, did you end up in crossing the line of the country border and immigrate continuously by just taking a stroll or going shopping? This is an unusually curious place, the post town in which there's the country border. The land of fire is on the right side of the line. Likewise, the left side of the land of hot water. At the sixth words, I stared intently at the country border. The line drawn beneath my feet. Just by taking one step forward from here, I'd be in another country. It's not that the odor of the air and the color of the earth changed, but that was another country. It was a rather strange sensation. Aren't the townspeople confused by this? Once, the residents of the land of fire were those who had their homes in the half of the land of fire. The residents of the land of hot water were those who had their homes in the half of the land of hot water, and in case the building was straddling across the line of the country border, they had to decide in which country they were residents, judging by the position of the entranceway or the percentage of the area of the lot. But that was basically settled with the negotiations of the official documents once and for all, that the people of this town were just residents of this town. However, only this day the situation is different. Gai-san, who had nodded in approval at the sixth words, continued, making an unusually serious face. There are two ancient hot springs in this town, which straddle across the line of the country border. One is called Hot Spring of the Dog, and the other one is the Hot Spring of the Cat. Gai-san began telling a legend that was passed down in this town. This is the story of before this place had become a town, of when it was a village. They said that a dog, which had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, was digging in the ground with the youth of the village. In place where the youth had dug, a hot spring had gushed forth. Thanks to the hot spring, the village where people were gathered expanded, and soon became a town. The people of the village were thankful to the dog. That dog was surely a messenger of the dog god, used a mask that represented the dog god as a charm thereafter, and named that hot spring of the dog. On the other hand, there's also this story. Likewise, it's a story of before this place had become a town, of when it was a village. A cat, which had appeared out of nowhere, had incessantly been beckoning a youth of the village in a certain place. In the place where the youth had tried to dig, thinking that it was strange, a hot spring had gushed forth. Thanks to the hot spring, the village where people were gathered expanded, and soon became a town. The people of the village were thankful to the cat. That dog was surely a messenger of the cat god, used a mask that represented the cat god as a charm thereafter, and named that hot spring of the cat. Wait a second. They're practically the same story, aren't they? I exclaimed, surprised, after Gai-san told me the legends that were passed down in that town. Now I was amazed by this town for both the country border and the legends. The two hot springs has two similar legends. In the end, a violent antagonism arose among the people who live in this place because of this. It was a dispute that concerned which one of the stories was true, and which was the legitimate god of the town, the dog god or the cat god. As time passed, the dispute changed shape, and before they became aware of it, it became a festival. And today, coincidentally, must be the day of the festival, which takes place once a year. Hearing the story of the origin of the town and the history of the festival from Gai-san, I remembered that the sixth had spoken ambiguously about the name of the festival some time ago. Dog Cat Festival and Cat Dog Festival. Probably the residents of the faction of the dog god who wore the dog mask called it Dog Cat Festival, and on the contrary, the residents of the faction of the cat god who wore the cat mask called it Cat Dog Festival. It was natural that the sixth had lowered the volume of his voice, paying attention to the eyes of those around him. Depending on the way you called the festival, it was clear which faction you belonged to. In short, it meant that the other faction would be automatically against you. I already said it before, but they had settled the matter using the sense of value that all the residents here, rather than being people of such and such country, are residents of this town. They don't stick to the country border. This is the characteristic of this town, which has been brought up in the antagonism dogs or cats. While listening to the sixth speech, I mused. The fact that the matter had been settled with an antagonism between dogs and cats looked like an improbable story if you thought about it in general, but it was surely like that in this unique town. For example, if the house on your right was straddling across the line of the country border, it would be in another country, despite being very near. Also, the people who lived in it would belong to another country. However, the people were of the same dog faction as yours, so you could have a friendly relationship with them. On the other hand, if in the house on your left there were people of the same country as yours, but they were of the cat faction. During the festival that was held once a year, they were against you, but usually you get along with them, helping each other, so you could have a friendly relationship with them. Guessing from the sixth and Gai-san's story, I wondered if the settlement of the whole town wasn't born with a feeling like that. Oh, it looks like the residents always settle things like this, but I've heard that the day of the festival they're extremely against each other. Besides, in recent years, the dog factions and the cat factions from around the world, who heard rumors about this festival, are gathering here. For a thing like this, people. This was the reason why there were so many people in a town that wasn't so big. It was because the dog factions and the cat factions from around the world marched on this city, aiming at that day. On top of that, this festival is the so-called Coral Festival. Gai-san added, and the sixth nodded. The one in which strong men wearing nothing but a loincloth make the portable shrines of a huge dog and a huge cat clash while emitting a war cry. It's a famous thing that everyone has heard of at least once. I had heard of this ceremony for the first time in my life. I couldn't say that I didn't know what to do. Apparently, there are a lot of injured people every year. That is, if the number of people increases that much. The two calmly looked at the people taking part to the festival. It must be some kind of fate that we accidentally came here the day of the festival. Kakashi, how about watching the portable shrines in the special seats, since we have the chance? Oh, okay. In the end, he had suggested that. However, as their attendant and guard, honestly I'd have preferred that they'd stop watching a dangerous festival like that so up close. Because there were too many people, too much for me to keep an eye on all by myself. And far from wanting the help of a cat, I needed the help of a highly trained ninja dog. This is a little dangerous. Please stop. The moment I tried to say this, I was interrupted by Gai-san's voice. Look, Kakashi. The dog and cat factions are already shooting up fireworks here and there. Lured by his voice, I unintentionally looked around, too. Near the line of the country border, the confrontation between the dog and cat factions had already begun. With an imposing stance, they didn't budge an inch. There weren't only people. Before I had noticed it, also dogs and cats had gathered around us. In the commotion, the growling of the dogs mixed with the noise of the crowd. Sometimes, the bursting high-pitched cries of the cats resounded. Soon the portable shrines would probably follow. The town was already wrapped in a feverish atmosphere, and between the dog and cat factions, which were facing each other, the air was full to the brim of a tension that seemed the calm before a storm. Thereupon, I exclaimed, perceiving the figure of a familiar person at the margin of my field of vision. Kiba-san. Tamaki-san. They were facing each other near the line of the country border. I knew those two very well, since I was a child. Mirai. What are you doing here? Kiba-san, who had noticed me, opened his eyes wide. It was an unlikely place for a meeting. Probably, even I was making the same face. Kiba-san, who had a wild appearance, with his straight bangs combed back and his goatee, was one of the best ninja dog user in Konoha, and one of my mother's pupils. Glad to see a known face, I rushed over to Kiba-san. I happened to pass by on a mission. Ooh, so it's a coincidence. Ah, hi, 6th Kakashi-sensei, Gai-sensei. When he noticed the 6th and Gai-san, who were behind me, Kiba-san made a fawning bow while smiling a little awkwardly. Being on the verge of calling him 6th and correcting himself, flustered, was typical of Kiba-san indeed. In a place full of people like this, he couldn't call him 6th or Hokage-sama. Because you never know who's listening. Are you two in a holiday trip? Unlike me, the 6th was calm, not particularly surprised. I wondered if it was his old man's wisdom what made him heavily prepared. Ah, no, well, that's right, but... Oi, Kakashi, aren't we intruding? No, it's that. With a rather evasive tone, Kiba-san gave Tamaki-san a fleeting glance. Thereupon, Tamaki-san turned away with a humph, crossing her arms. It's not the wrong moment, right? At the 6th's puzzlement, Kiba-san answered with an awkward expression. Straddling across the country border, there are these things called Hot Spring of the Dog and Hot Spring of the Cat, right? Well, we were kinda having a little dispute over which one we would go in first. For a thing like that. Probably he had imagined it was something much more serious. The voice of the 6th's heart had escaped out of his mouth. Can't you do a thing like this? Each one of you goes in the one he or she likes the most. No, because we came here expressly for that, after we came all the way here for the festival. At Gai-san's suggestion, Kiba-san answered with a bitter smile. Surely there was the distance from the village to the country border in itself. The fact that they had expressly come here was a lonesome story. That's right. Speaking of coming expressly here, Akamaru, that's my boy. He managed to come here. With an all right, he brushed Akamaru gently, making him knead. Akamaru was a considerably old dog. When I was born was already an adult dog. I remember that when I was a child he often played with me. Nowadays I have heard that, maybe because of his age, his legs and loins have weakened and he sleeps at home all day long more, but it's as one would expect from a ninja dog. He had often walked to places so far away. I brushed him gently while I calmly thought things like those, and a puppy rushed over me shaking his tail. This white puppy, which looked like a little Akamaru, was a ninja dog of the next generation that would take over Akamaru's techniques. When I brushed the puppy just like I did with Akamaru, Tamaki-san's voice echoed, if you're still complaining despite the fact that we decided the hot spring of the cat with the majority rule, you're not a real man. The majority rule, you say, it is if you include the cats. Kiba-san, who was talking in a different tone when he was talking with the 6th and Gai-san, raised a voice of protest. Tamaki-san was a beautiful woman with silky hair, and was famous for her fondness for cats. Even now, it wasn't clear if stray or what, a lot of cats were gathered around Tamaki-san. Apparently those two had decided whether to enter in the hot spring of the dog or in the hot spring of the cat first with the majority rule. In this case, it seemed that Tamaki-san was saying that she had won, including also the number of the cats she had brought. Probably the matter had become extremely complicated, but why did they end up in the ambiguous discussion of using the majority rule in one-to-one situation to begin with? It was a mystery. Then, if the condition was that they'd include also the dogs and the cats in the majority rule, why Kiba-san didn't notice the fact that he'd definitely lose before they started, judging by the difference of the number of dogs and cats they had both brought along? Were there so many things I didn't understand about quarrels between adult couples? Actually, I already told you before that if it's so, also the hot spring of the cat is okay, didn't I? But I'm not happy if you come reluctantly like that. I'm not particularly reluctant. Kiba-san and Tamaki-san's quarrel began again. Probably they had been quarreling like this from before we came here. Strangely, the dispute between the dog faction and the cat faction had broke out today, just like the festival that was being held that day in that place. On the background, there was the statue of a dog that emitted hot water from its mouth, overlapping with Kiba-san's figure. Also at Tamaki-san's side, there was the statue of a cat that emitted hot water from its mouth. At first glance, the two statues seemed fountains, but a thick steam rose up both from the hot water that gushed out of their mouth and from the hot water that gathered at the feel of the statues. It seemed that, somehow, the hot water that was emitted had a quite high temperature. The very hot water that flowed abundantly out of the statues reached a moderate temperature while it passed through the pipes from here and was supplied in various places of the town as hot springs. The two statues were probably the reproductions of two legends that were passed down in the town. The statues were completely separated by a wall that had been built between them, and the hot spring of the dog and the hot spring of the cat never met. The scene was just as if it was symbolizing those two right now. "Ah, enough. I got it. I got it," said Kiba-san with an increasingly louder voice. "If it means that much to you, let's decide again with the majority rule. Of course, only with people this time. With this, there won't be any future troubles," he informed Tamaki-san. "You'll complain in any case, no matter what result will come out, right?" "I won't. Because I'll win this time. Kakashi-sensei." "Kakashi-sensei, you're in the dog faction, right?" The sixth, who had the force of the conversation suddenly pointed towards him in the middle of the quarrel, answered, though confused, yeah. If I were asked which one, because I was a ninja dog user, too." "All right. Well then, it's the hot spring of the dog. Kiba-san said, and pulled the sixth near him. It looked like we had been involved in those two's majority rule. Then the majority rule had begun and soon became a 2-against-1, and Tamaki-san puffed her cheeks, dissatisfied for the outcome. However, Gai-san had already moved. "If Kakashi is for that faction, I'm for the hot spring of the cat." Gai-san lined himself up with Tamaki-san, moving his wheelchair skillfully. "Frankly, I don't care at all about your love quarrel. But Kakashi and I are eternal rivals. I'll always get in Kakashi's way." "This person really says what he's thinking." I stared at Gai-san, who was yelling hotly, pointing at the sixth, half amazed. However, anyhow, with him the majority rule had turned into a 2-against-2. Tamaki-san was rejoicing, jumping up and down, and Kiba-san was making an unpleasant expression. Then, their gazes focused on me. Kiba-san and Tamaki-san, and even the sixth and Gai-san, were staring fixedly at me. "Yeah. Don't tell me." I faltered, and Kiba-san smiled at me. "Mirai, you're in the dog faction, of course?" "Oh, Mirai-chan has always liked cats since she was a child, right?" "Right?" Also Tamaki-san smiled gently at me. That scene was nothing but a déjà vu. That was the negative effect of a group of 5 people. Again, I had become the last person. Mirai has been playing with Akamaru for ages, right? She can't be a cat lover. But Mirai-chan often played with the cats at my house, too. But she's been playing with Akamaru for longer. But the memories of when she played with my cats are more impressive, right, Mirai-chan? Kiba-san and Tamaki-san's quarrel began again. Moreover, this time it was a fight with me in the middle. Because the faction that I'd choose would win according to the majority rule. However, an important role like that was too much responsibility for me. Nervously, I tried to suggest something to those two. "Here, I like them both." "You can't say that," they yelled the same words completely in sync. Why were they acting like this despite they were so friendly, so bad, I thought while making a stiff smile. Dogs or cats? Which on earth should I choose? However, even if I chose one of them, surely I'd hurt the one I didn't choose. Both Kiba-san and Tamaki-san were adults that have often been looking after me since I was a child. I simply couldn't choose one of them. "Hey, Mirai. I beg you. You're for the dog faction, right? Please, say the dog faction. In the end, Kiba-san began urging me. Somehow, I even felt like he had teary eyes. Why, a thing like this? I beg you. As Kurenai-sensei's child, I need you to be in the dog faction. Of course, from Kiba-san's point of view, who is a ninja dog user, a student of my mother's, and who's been taking care of me since I was born, it was natural that he wanted me to be a dog lover, too. At Kiba-san's words, I remembered an event of my childhood. That's a story of Shino-san, who was a student of my mother's just like Kiba-san. That day was my birthday. Since it was quite a long time ago, I don't remember well how old I was, but it was before I even entered the academy. Even now there are illustrated encyclopedias in the bookshelf of my room, but that day Shino-san had given one to me as a birthday present. There are also illustrated encyclopedias of animals, weathers, and geography. If you read them, you'll learn a lot of nice things. And my advice is also an illustrated encyclopedia of insects. Because at that time, my eyes sparkled at the sight of those illustrated encyclopedias spreading one by one in front of me. I'll read this. Among the others, there was an illustrated encyclopedia of animals that had attracted the child me right away. I turned the pages, just like inside a dream, in which there were drawn the ecology of various animals, and at the end there was a page called Human Beings and Their Animal Friends. There, they had inserted a lot of photos of every species of dogs and cats. This looks like Akamaru. I pointed at the picture of a dog, and Shino-san nodded gently. That's right. It's just like Akamaru. They also recorded how to make friends with dogs here. However, there are a lot of dogs in this village beside Akamaru. That's why I'd like to recommend you to read this illustrated encyclopedia of insects first. Because in this illustrated encyclopedia there are unusually rare insects that you can't see in the village. Also, cats are cute. That's right. Cats are cute. Also, cats are animals like this. However, this illustrated encyclopedia of insects here, their fur is so fluffy there are also insects that grow fur. If you read an illustrated encyclopedia of insects like this, I remember that next to me, who was staring at the illustrated encyclopedia of animals as if I was about to devour it, Shino-san was incessantly offering me the illustrated encyclopedia of insects. Thinking back now, even though he said it was a set of illustrated encyclopedias, Shino-san wanted to give me an illustrated encyclopedia of insects in fact. Taking a set of illustrated encyclopedias with also an illustrated encyclopedia of insects was very typical of Shino-san. Probably Shino-san, as an insect user, wanted me to become an insect lover, just like Kiba-san now. If I thought about it, even if I was a child, for some reason I feel rather guilty that I really got into the illustrated encyclopedia of animals. Surely, I had made him feel lonely deep down. I was thinking these things in front of Kiba-san, who was begging me to say the dog faction. By the way, these illustrated encyclopedias had also been the reason why I had grown to like looking at maps. The maps of the world that was depicted in the illustrated encyclopedia were the first. For me, who hadn't been outside the village and hadn't entered the academy yet, illustrated encyclopedias and maps were the only important things that connected me to the outside world. I stared at the world maps almost every day without getting tired of it, to the point that I'm amazed if I think back now. Besides maps and illustrated encyclopedias, I also love reading. Staring at the maps, I was thrilled by the world, which I hadn't seen yet, and looking at the illustrated encyclopedias my heart raced sometimes, while I daydreamed about when I'd meet the true thing. But I never had imagined that I'd become the last one in a majority rule in a town that was just above the line of the country border. The hot spring of the dog is nice. No matter what they say, the history is different. The episode of the dog that digs working together with the human is heartwarming. The hot spring of the dog warms both your body and your heart, don't you agree? What? It's a rip-off of the hot spring of the cat. The hot spring of the cat is absolutely better than that. It's the birthplace for sure, because it's a mysterious place in which the beckoning cat had taught the position of the hot spring. The situation in which I was torn between the dog faction and the cat faction, between Kiba-san and Tamaki-san, continued. It wasn't the moment to remember the story of the bug faction, I mean, the faction of the insects. Why do you say that the cat beckoned? There's no way that the cat would know something like the position of the hot spring. If you say this, what about the digging dog? Dogs don't dig things like hot springs. Dogs dig holes and bury bones in them, the end. And yet I'm astonished that they have completely plagiarized the legend of the hot spring of the cat. Tamaki-san sighed openly and shook her head with a my. On the other hand, Kiba-san gritted his teeth, showing his sharp canines. TCH, you've been saying rip off for a while. It was you cat bastards that had plagiarized the legend of the hot spring of the dog. These cat burglars. See, cat burglars. You're so rude. Apologize. Apologize to all the cats. Why should I apologize to all the cats? To begin with, you're always, then, that moment. Oh. A war cry rose together with a drumming sound that seemed to reverberate till the bottom of my stomach. In the central part of the town, the portable shrines were coming along the main street. The gazes of all the people who were in that place focused in the same spot. In front of our eyes, a large number of men were carrying the portable shrines on their shoulders. It was a terrific scene of muscular men who wore masks and nothing but a loincloth knocking the dog and cat portable shrines against each other. It was way more intense than I had imagined hearing the sixth story. The cheers of the people around us blended with the roars of carriers. Every time the portable shrines clashed violently, the dogs barked somehow loudly, and the cats meowed as if they were in heat. In the end, angry roars began mixing with the cheers, and in an instant the whole town was wrapped by a noisy atmosphere. People marched on together with the portable shrines. It was completely like a wave of people. Between the portable shrines, the dog factions and the cat factions that had gathered from around the world began pushing and shoving. That surely was the dog-cat festival, or cat-dog festival, that had been passed down in this town for ancient times. Meanwhile, some muscular men wearing a dog mask that were next to us, members of the dog faction, began stirring for some reason. It seemed that somehow they were intermittently peeking at our situation. Shortly after, one of the men approached us. "Excuse me, are you perhaps that famous Kiba-san among the ninja dog users that is said to have been extremely close to become Hokage?" Even if he blinked for the sudden development, Kiba-san nodded immediately. "Ah, yeah. That's right, but what the hell?" "Ooh," the men raised a hoarse cheer. Those stern men, who were wearing a dog mask and leather jackets on their bare skin, became excited like little girls in front of their favorite actor. "Cool, it's him in person. The real Kiba-san. That Kiba-san, who's said to be the strongest person in his generation of ninja dog users. That Kiba-san, who's said to be well informed about every walking course in the country and thoroughly strict like a demon towards owners that mistreat their pets. That Kiba-san, who's said to love dogs too much and to have begun selling his original dog food. They say that Kiba-san samples it by himself." The men of the dog faction began giving praises to Kiba-san unanimously. I had the feeling that as they went towards the latter half, the quality of the rumors decreased considerably, but anyhow it seemed that the men looked up to Kiba-san quite a lot. At first, Kiba-san was taken aback in front of those men, but immediately when I wondered what was he thinking, "That's right, I'm Kiba-aya." He clutched his fist tight and began howling towards the sky. Probably he was in a good mood because he was unexpectedly famous. At Kiba-san's yell, also the other people of the dog faction that had gathered around us emitted a yoo-oh. "He's Kiba-san. That Kiba-san came here, yee. If Kiba-san is here, we have the strength of 100 people." "Yoo-oh," smashed the cat faction. "As I thought, dogs are the number one ee." At Kiba-san's appearance, the people of the dog faction were getting more and more excited. "Alright guys, let's teach those guys of the cat faction the awesomeness of dogs new. A choir of Kiba-san rose near us, and Kiba-san was lifted up by the men. Move on, move on, move on. Give way to Kiba-san. I'm Kibaya. Kiba-san, who had turned into a portable shrine, began parading through the town. The men cried out angry yells. You guys of the cat faction, clear the road. He's Kiba-san. That's right. I'm Kibaya. Then also the cat faction began stirring, for a different reason from the excited dog factions. Who's that? No way, it's really him. As they had various degrees of enthusiasm, the confrontation of the dog and cat factions continued. Eat shit, cat faction, the men who were lifting Kiba-san yelled, gathering all their voices. Also Kiba-san, who was looking very pleased of being lifted like a portable shrine, yelled, joining the men. That's right, eat shit, you selfish cat faction. However, a moment later, I clearly heard a voice among the ruckus. As I thought, we're not meant for each other. It was Tamaki-san who had muttered this, sighing. Tamaki-san was making a sad face. Just like me, someone else had heard Tamaki-san's voice. Kiba-san was taken aback. However, since they were being pushed by the wave of people in their wild frenzy, the distance between Kiba-san and Tamaki-san opened further and further. We were completely swallowed by the wave of people who proceeded together with the portable shrines. Tamaki. No, Kiba-san was frantically following Tamaki-san with his eyes. However, the wild dog and cat factions were ruthlessly driving them apart. Damn it, why did it turn out like this? I just want to be with you. The violent clashing of the portable shrines began. The sound of the drums and the voices of the people made the air vibrate. Kiba-san's cry of pain was erased by the tumult of the festival. Probably. Kiba-san's voice hadn't reached Tamaki-san. The wave motion that was the dog and cat factions, which seemed so big that a single person couldn't do anything against it, was trying to split the two with all its strength. The dog faction, or the cat faction. The thing that I, who couldn't choose which one of the two even with the majority rule, had to do now was, Kakashi-san, this way. Slipping through the wave of people around me, I began moving with the sixth. I made the sixth, who was jostled between the dog faction and the cat faction, take shelter in a safe place. Really, I was also worried about Kiba-san and Tamaki-san, but there was a thing I had to do. I had to protect the sixth. That was the thing I had to do now. Out of breath, I slipped out of the wave of people without taking even a break. The portable shrines were going far off. Also Kiba-san, who had been lifted together with the portable shrines, was going far off, without being able to go against the strong flow. It was just like a battle. It was no longer the size of a festival. I looked behind me, and stared at that scene dumbfounded while catching my breath. The two legends that were passed down in this town. The antagonism between the dog and cat factions that spanned long years. The choral festival that continued even now. Kiba-san was like the leaf of a tree that was floating and being tossed about in the middle of the flow of the large river of history, which was spun continuously like this. Probably Kiba-san himself couldn't do anything about it anymore. It had been decided from the start that things were like that. No matter how much you wanted it, dogs don't get used to cats, and cats don't get used to dogs. Surely, there were rare exceptions like him. And I, who couldn't decide which one of the two, couldn't do anything even there. I hanged my head, and the sixth asked me quietly, "You're worried about those two, right?" But, I'm okay, so why don't you go? The sixth smiled sweetly. However, what could I do in this situation? The wave of people that filled the whole road didn't reach Kiba-san and the other side. When I yelled, my voice faded out immediately. With that, the huge wave motion of the dog and cat faction didn't stop. It couldn't stop. How can I do it? Do you remember when the portable shrines came? The conversation stopped immediately, and the gazes of all the people who were in that place focused on the same spot, right? You should do a thing like that. Just like the portable shrines, surely Kiba-san and Tamaki-san's dispute had stopped that moment. All of us, and also the other people who were in that place, looked at the portable shrines simultaneously. However, what could I do like that? I was perplexed, so the sixth whispered quietly into my ear. Something that is a dog, and also a cat. Something like this exists, right? I see, that's right. At the sixth words, my eyes sparkled. Interesting. If it's so, maybe I could stop the uproar of this place, maybe even the wave motion of the gray history. You can do it. Right, Mirai? Yes, sir. Then, I dashed. My body was light. The fact that I had been tormented by a feeling of impotence not long ago seemed a lie. Then, the sixth voice reached me from behind. Ah, that's right. Could you look for Guy while you're at it? Oh. Right. I had completely forgot that Guy-san had been left behind in the wave of people. However, I found him right away. Because the uproar had calmed down in no time. The first thing I had to do was gathering everybody's gazes just like the portable shrines. I noticed a lighter that had been dropped. Probably someone had dropped it in the mayhem. Just what I needed. I turned on the lighter I had picked up and threw it with all my strength. The lighter passed beneath people's feet while revolving, sliding on the ground. In the end, the lighter went past both the portable shrines and the wave of people and stopped colliding with the towering wall that separated the hot spring of the dog and the hot spring of the cat. Then, I formed hand seals without delay, fire release, flint yagura. Thereupon, the small flame that was lit on the lighter turned immediately into a pillar of fire. What's this? There's a fire. All the gazes of the people who were in that place concentrated on the flames that had appeared all of a sudden. Flint yagura, it was a technique that made a small spark burst into a pillar of fire. Essentially, it's a jutsu that catches the enemy off guard with a small flame, or makes them avoid the small flame, and then it instantly makes the flame bigger to the enemy's astonishment, but this time it became the magnet of everybody's attention instead. I met other hand seals. Thereupon, a huge mask emerged from the flames. It was exactly as if half mask worn by the dog faction and half mask worn by the cat faction had fused together. At the appearance of a huge mask that was half dog and half cat, both the dog and cat factions were equally surprised. Shrieks rose from here and there, and in the place where they were fighting each other there was no one anymore. What's this monster? Guy-san's voice resounded. Since his voice was loud, it helped me to know his whereabouts. Of course, that huge mask wasn't a monster, but a thing I had made with a genjutsu. I had used the flames as a screen and projected my genjutsu onto them. What the hell? One final push to the stirring crowd. Children, stop this futile fight. I hummed in a dry voice still forming hand seals, and my voice was emitted by the huge mask. It turned into a deep voice different from mine, similar to a thunder, and it made the buildings nearby tremble as well. The atmosphere, which could just be mistaken for a battlefield, changed completely, and now all around me felt suddenly quiet. Everyone was holding their breath with a gulp, and watched attentively the image of the mask that was floating near the wall that separated the hot spring of the dog and the hot spring of the cat. One final push, a divine message. From the start, the two legends that were passed down in this town were deeply connected to a background of antagonism between the dog and cat factions, which continued for long years. The story that the dog, which was a messenger of the dog god, had found the hot spring, and the story that the cat, which was a messenger of the cat god, had found a hot spring. They were fighting over which one was the legitimate one, and which one was the real guardian deity of this place, so it had been nice if there wasn't a pretext to fight. In short, this meant that with the apparition of a supernatural creature that was half dog and half cat right between the two hot springs, by giving them the divine message that both the legends and the guardian deities, the one of the dog and the one of the cat, were legitimate, I had stopped the dispute of both parties. The thing I needed to achieve this was a third fictitious deity created by Jinjutsu. From the sixth hint, I had invented this huge masked deity. It was a hurriedly invented deity, but if it was the divine message of a god that had both a dog and cat face, surely both the dog and cat factions, all the people who were in that place should obediently lend an ear to it. See, could you possibly be the third god that protects this place, Katak-sama? Are you for real? That was close. I had almost said a punchline without thinking. Yeah, a townsperson had asked me that, and when I answered with the god's voice, everyone began stirring. The third deity. The one that they said it could or couldn't be right between the two hot springs. Was it real? What the heck was that? Instinctively, I shifted my gaze towards the sixth. When our eyes met, the sixth, who had his arms crossed, nodded slightly. Probably, the sixth knew about the story of the third deity from the beginning. If it was so, even though I thought he should have told me this from the very start, I concentrated on continuing the divine message. Actually, it was just right if there was the story of a third deity. I could stop the feudal fight between the dog and cat factions immediately, found Gai-san while I was at it, and even go soaking in a hot spring quickly. Too much things had happened today. And, that moment, at the corner of my field of vision, something jumped. It was Gai-san. Yeah. I yelled instinctively, still forming hand seals. For some reason, Gai-san, wheelchair and all, had jumped in a straight line towards the huge mask. Yeah. The huge mask screamed in a deep voice. The buildings in my surroundings trembled, rattling. The people that had been taken aback by the gods, some more screamed as well. Suddenly, everyone panicked. You monster, you plan on destroying the festival. I won't allow such thing. Gai-san yelled and thrust himself towards the huge mask. I didn't understand at all how things had turned out like this. In front of my eyes, before I could even think, there was Gai-san's figure revolving in midair. In the first place, I didn't even know how he had jumped. What was that person? Why was he going towards me when the divine message had done the trick? What's this boldness? Anyhow, everything was a mess because of that. As Gai-san was falling violently, I screamed as well. Stop, Gai-san. Nuu. Dynamic entry. Gai-san stuck out his left leg in front of him and precipitated like a meteor. Gai-san's kick didn't hit, although he was hitting directly the mask. That was because it was just a Jinjutsu I had created. Stupquay-swan, the huge mask yelled, and disappeared, crumbling wretchedly. Gai-san had disappeared behind the screen of flames that was behind it. Hot, oh damn-night. I heard Gai-san's screams. It was obvious. Because he had slipped through the Jinjutsu and plunged into the screen of flames. Then also this screen of flames disappeared once and for all as if nothing had happened. All my concentrated energies were disturbed by an unexpected movement near Gai-san. From the spot where Gai-san had landed, I heard a bang. Slam. Twitch. Crash. And other ominous breaking sounds. However, a large quantity of steam and a cloud of dust were enshrouding the surroundings, and I couldn't see anything. Gee, Gai-san. When finally the steam and the cloud of dust cleared out, the dog statue that emitted hot water and the cat statue that emitted hot water as well were built one next to the other. This town's invariant scene. No, it was different. The wall that was between the two statues had crumbled into piece. Next to it, a slightly burnt Gai-san was lying down together with the rumbles. Apparently, he was exhausted. The thing that Gai-san, who had become a shape that had slipped through the Jinjutsu and jumped into the flames and driven his kick into was the wall that separated the hot spring of the dog and the hot spring of the cat, which was behind it. The breaking sounds of some time ago were the sounds of the kick hitting the wall, which cracked and crumbled. Despite the fact that they were still one next to the other, the statues of the dog and the cat, which you could never see both figures because you were obstructed by the wall, were now facing each other. And that wasn't the only thing that had changed. Oi, that's... A voice of surprise rose from the people who were staring at the crumbled wall dumbfounded. The hot spring of the dog and the hot spring of the cat became one. The wall was destroyed, and the hot water gushing out of the statue of the dog and the hot water gushing out of the statue of the cat were blending together. The two hot springs, which have never met. Don't tell me that the wall is destroyed. The people around me stirred, and I broke out in a cold sweat. Not only the divine message had gone bad, but the wall that had been separating the two statues for long years had been destroyed. Moreover, the direct cause of the destroyed wall was Gai-san, an outsider. I wondered what the townspeople would think in seeing this. Would the dog and cat factions, who were amusing themselves at the Extreme Choral Festival, really approve this? As I thought these things, I couldn't stop trembling, even if it wasn't cold. The divine message. Someone muttered, sighing. The divine message. Someone else muttered in the commotion. It was a divine message from the Kataksama. The voices of the crowd became gradually louder. The two hot springs, which mustn't have met, became one. This is the divine message. Being unable to be indifferent to the feudal fight between the dog and cat factions, Kataksama came here and visited us. We should join hands like these hot springs and develop the town. Yo! People shouted excitedly. There weren't the figures of the dog faction and the cat faction anymore. In front of the destroyed wall, there was just one great bond that exceeded both the dog and cat faction. That is all the people loving this city and the hot springs. Everything was basically settled with the fact that the people of this town were just residents of this town. It was just as the sixth had said. I reflected thoroughly about the weight and the meaning of these words again. A town divided by the country border. A country that was different from the written documents. And the dog faction and cat faction that quarreled at every opportunity. However, the residents of this town loved this town in which they lived from the bottom of their hearts and were proud of it and had really good relationships with everyone. Well, I guess everything turned out all right in the end, said the sixth, who had come standing next to me without me noticing him, and smiled. Yeah, but I failed. I couldn't be happy about it, honestly. Even if an unexpected situation had happened, it didn't change the fact that I had lost my concentration and accidentally dissolved my jinjutsu. What would have happened if it had been a real fight? I felt like I had plainly displayed my immaturity. Failure? I don't think so. Look. When I looked, prompted by the sixth, Kiba-san and Tamaki-san had managed to meet again, separated from the crowd. Kiba-san was apologizing frantically. And Tamaki-san was smiling bitterly at Kiba-san's appearance. There wasn't even an atom of the gloomy atmosphere that was between them some time ago. Apparently, they managed to make peace. Oh, Mirai! Kiba-san, who had noticed my gaze, came together with Tamaki-san. You know, I'm sorry I made you worry. After this, we were thinking of going in the hot spring. We shouldn't have argued about which hot spring was going on first. Kiba-san, who was smiling looking embarrassed, lowered the tone of his voice a little. Thank you, Mirai. Kiba-san said, showing his white teeth. Kiba-san had noticed that the jinjutsu of the huge mask was my doing. Surely, I couldn't deceive a student of my mother's? We bade farewell, and I looked at Kiba-san's and Tamaki-san's back as they walked away. Following after them, the dogs and the cats, Akamaru included, were walking cuddling close together. There wasn't the image of the dog and cat factions glaring at each other anymore. Even if the exact opposites attract, maybe sooner or later the day will come in which they can understand each other. It's awfully difficult, but surely it's not impossible. Anyhow, their personalities were just like the exact opposite Sixth and Gai-san, who were good friends and were going on a hot spring trip together like this. It's surely him, the dark man who was able to come as Kataksama's messenger. Who? The dark man that watches over the space right between the statues. The good man who's been burned black. Let's build a statue of the dark man here. Cheers were rising from the townspeople. Guy-san, who had lost consciousness for the impact that had destroyed the wall, had been surrounded by the townspeople before I became aware of it and had been lifted up. Of course, now that there wasn't the wall anymore, both the dog and cat statues had become a new sightseeing spot, but now it turned out that they'd built a statue of the dark man between the dog and cat statues instead of the wall. If we didn't prevent it at all costs, or rather, if we didn't bring him home quickly. Let's go, Kakashi-san. Together with the sixth, I went to a confused Guy-san's side. Our surroundings were full of tourists. Even this relatively small town couldn't help but be crowded with people on a day like that. Oh. That time, I remembered something that I had forgot just till then. And the moment I remembered it, I felt like my whole body had turned pale. Come to think of it, what shall we do about today's inn? There was so much traffic. Without even a reservation, naturally there wouldn't be any vacant inn. Today a reservation of lodging place was already hopeless. Perhaps, camping. We came till here? A thing like that, I was at my wit's end for the too many events. It had been an intense day. My body, which had been running around since morning and was exhausted, needed a hot spring and a soft mattress. However, it seemed that my wish wouldn't come true. I made a fed-up face, but the sixth, who had been traveling with me, wasn't perturbed. Camping. Well, if we have physical and even spiritual strength, we'll make it somehow. With a relaxed atmosphere as usual, he laughed with a carefree ha ha ha. Even a fire is refreshing if you clear your mind. The thing we need is physical and spiritual strength. Coming to his senses, the burnt Guy-san started yelling things like that. Before I became aware of it, also those two had understood each other just like the dog and cat factions. However, physical and spiritual strength. Those words were a sort of déjà vu. Or rather, those words were completely like déjà vu. I, who was feeling irritated by the too many déjà vu, yelled at the top of my lungs, of course we'll need both. Cut it out. End of chapter 2. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.